My name, and I'm also just quick pin myself for a second as we kind of ping pong. So my name is Seth Collins. I'm the Director of Learning at Terra.do. We are really, really excited to be putting on the first of our three-part webinar series on pioneering global climate solutions in partnership with the Solutions Journalism Network, which I will be passing over to Angela maybe a little bit faster than I thought because they're doing our first Wednesday of the month tornado siren test apparently right now. So I will be brief. But I just wanted to say this is the first of a three-part series that we'll be running that are starting today, and we'll be doing another one on September 11th, another one on September 18th, all focused on elevating global climate solutions from across the globe. And we've got speakers from almost every continent except for Antarctica, who will be here, who will be with us over these three-part series. The next one today is we'll be speaking about nature-based solutions. Next week, we'll be speaking about indigenous climate solutions. And then in the third week, we'll be speaking about the co-benefits of climate solutions. Just to do a quick intro around Terra.do, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are focused on helping accelerate people towards working on climate. We have a mission of getting 100 million people working directly on climate this decade. We help people learn climate skills, build professional networks in climate, find new kinds of work. And we run both learning programs and other types of events like this to help folks discover more about what you can do in the climate space and all the different ways you can take really meaningful, effective action at this really important time. You can find out more about this session and the other sessions on our website, and I'll just put a quick note in the chat to what that page is if you didn't see it. There's a couple resources there that are also available for you. We're making available some resources both for journalists and for non-journalists around communicating about climate change and climate journalism. We'll also you can also download free fact sheets on each of the main subject areas, and we'll ultimately also be posting and sharing the sort of summaries of these sessions as well. So that will all be sort of there, and that's a resource hub, and you can RSVP for the other events as well. Angela, I'll hand it over for you for a moment just to introduce the Solutions Journalism Network, and then we'll go into the panel.
Thanks, Seth. Hi, everyone. I am Angela Evans with the Solutions Journalism Network. I'm the Climate Network Manager. We also have our Director of Climate, Dr. Landria Povachel-Jackson, with us today. For those of you who maybe aren't as familiar with the Solutions Journalism Network, we promote solutions journalism, which is rigorous evidence-based reporting on responses to social problems. And specifically on our climate team, we're really concerned with supporting the knowledge, skill building, resources for journalists to report on climate solutions around the world. We have a large network of journalists we work with, and we're really excited to be partnering with Terra.do today. With that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, Helina Selemon from the New York Amsterdam News. She is a science reporter with the investigative unit at Blacklight and a really skilled solutions journalism practitioner. So Helina, I'll let you take it.
Thanks, Angela. And hello, everybody from LA, from Colorado, Barcelona, and I hope you share more places that you're all hailing from. For this discussion today on nature-based solutions, we're joined by Bernadette Arakawi. She's the Senior Manager of Africa Land Restoration Programs at the World Resources Institute. We're also joined by Dilafruz Koenig-Boyeva, Executive Director of Home Planet Fund, and Dr. Hassan Sashidina, CEO of Sayari Earth. So we've got a really talented panel here that we'll get right into it. And we're going to start by having our panelists tell us a little bit about themselves and give us a brief description of their work and relationship to nature-based solutions. Then we're going to dive right into the rest of our questions and save the last third of our call for your questions. So if you have burning questions for us, send them to the Q&A. We'll be watching everywhere, but it'd be helpful if you could plug it into that Q&A box. You can upvote other people's questions gives us a sense of what everybody in the room is feeling for answers on. So that would help us a whole lot. If we're ready to get started, without further ado, I'd like to start with Bernadette.
Sure, Helena. I hope everyone can hear me. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Like Helena said, my name is Bernadette Arakwiye. I work with the World Resources Institute, and I'm based in Rwanda. I also just noticed that my internet is a bit shaky, so if something happens, so please bear with me. But yeah, for those who are not familiar with WRI, the World Resources Institute, we are a global nonprofit organization, and we focus on creating practical solutions that protect the environment, reduce poverty, and improve the lives of people worldwide. For the work I'm closer to, WRI has been working on the African continent for over 30 years and supporting government and various sectors to find solutions that sustainably manage the environment, improve the conditions for the people, nature, and the climate. So keeping it brief for the work that we do on the restoration team, we support what we call a restoration movement on the African continent. This is an initiative aiming to reverse land degradation on the continent. And a number of African countries have made restoration pledges. So we support them to make their restoration ambition become a reality, but we don't stop with the government. We also work with the local communities because we know that restoration is best implemented when local communities are at the center. So I will leave it to that for now, and happy to elaborate later into the webinar. Back to you, Helena.
Thank you. Let's go to Dilafruz next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dilafruz Khonipoyeva. I'm Pamiri, which is an indigenous group. I'm from the Tajikistan side, where our group exists in Pakistan, Afghanistan, China as well. I founded and run Home Planet Fund. It started with initial donations from Patagonia, which is the US-based outdoor clothing company that made a plunge about 2 years ago, to give all the profits to the planet. Home Planet Fund really does three things. We're a nonprofit, a charity, and we do three things globally. One is we support underfunded people, underfunded solutions, and underfunded projects and areas. So underfunded people, we fund Indigenous peoples, tribal societies, communities directly. Two, we work across the world, but we work in places that are considered too fragile, too difficult, politically, socially, otherwise to work in, or geographies that just don't get as much attention, right? Whether they're grasslands or whether they're mountain societies or like Central Asia, where I'm from, for example. And then three, we support what we call Indigenous solutions, which NBS, nature-based solutions, is one part of that. We've been operating for about 2 years. And our existing projects right now that I can highlight are in East Africa with pastoralist communities in support of the grasslands, in Alaska in support of the rainforest, the temperate rainforest there. We do Central Asia work with regenerative agriculture along the glacial water flows, and we work in the Pacific Islands. There's other work we do, but those are where I'll start. And I'll hand it back to you. I'm looking forward to this.
Thanks, Dilafruz. Let's go to Hassan.
Thank you, Helena. Hi, everyone. My name is Hassan Sachidina. I'm originally from Kenya, and I'm calling in today from South Africa, where I live now. I consider myself a career conservationist. I spent the first half of my career working for conservation nonprofits, primarily in Africa. And the last 14 years, I've been involved in the nature-based carbon sector, working for 3 different project developers at an executive level. 2 I've actually founded. One is called BCP. It's a red developer, and I ran that as CEO for 10 years. In that time, it became one of the largest forest carbon developers in the world, and the largest by hectares and number of people impacted in Africa. A few years ago, I founded a removals company, nature-based carbon removals company called Sayari Earth, which is a social enterprise with the mission of restoring our planet by empowering people. And we're currently working on a pipeline of around 12 million hectares in 3 continents, primarily through partnerships with local organizations, to basically build out a portfolio of high quality nature-based carbon removal projects. Thank you.
And thank all of you. Let's get right into it. For the journalists and the non-journalists in the room, how should we frame NBS, nature-based solutions? How is it a climate solution, and how should we approach it in the context of other climate solutions? I'll let anyone volunteer to go first.
I'm happy to go first, Helina. Simply, the Paris Climate Agreement cannot be achieved without a nature-based response. I think it's, really, if we just take it, really just simplify this, it is if we're going to achieve the Paris Climate Agreement, if we're going to hit net zero, we need nature. What the science shows is that mitigation is approximately, the opportunity for mitigation from nature is around, 37% of this problem could probably be mitigated through nature-based carbon solutions. So basically optimizing the planet, soils, biomass, and the ocean to store carbon that we've emitted. Just those are a couple of points I just wanted to share.
Bernadette de la Cruz, would you like to add anything?
Sorry, I was finding the unmute button. I love the intervention from Hassan, and I believe it's also important to clarify, what is the value added? This is a new term or jargon, if I can put it that way, that is coming, a few years after some of these fields or topics have been established in the climate space. So demystifying or clarifying, what do we mean by nature-based solution? What's included? What's not included? What are the standards? And then how do we bring people along? I know that sometimes, us as the scientific community or others in this space, we tend to think about, the framing at the high level, and then we forget that at the end of the day, we are not solving these climate challenges for the sake of that. We are making sure that the solutions also make sense for the local communities. So what does this all mean? So demystifying, setting standards is really key for me. And it's one addition that I wanted to make.
That makes sense. De la Cruz, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to support what Bernadette said. I think that this is a relatively new term, right? I think you had this in the intro, but I'll restate again. This was first used around 15 years ago by IUCN as part of the climate negotiations. I think though understanding what we mean about what this looks like on the ground is really important. In terms of the actual communities and what this looks like, frequently it is reforesting or regenerative agriculture or these approaches that communities or indigenous peoples have been doing for thousands of years. And we're essentially repackaging them to say, you know what, we've done kind of the Western peer-reviewed science around this, and we're now repackaging, as Bernadette said, into a new term around nature-based solutions, because we feel that it is part of the larger, climate negotiations. But the actual day-to-day of what it looks like, the actual solutions, the actual climate solutions themselves have been around for a very long time, and they are inherently community-based because they've been passed down, through generations. And the proof very much is in some of these geographies that do have immense biodiversity, do have very healthy soil, are taking care of their lands and water. So I know we'll get into it, but I wanted to pick up that point a little bit more.
I'm glad you did, and I hope we do as well. I wanted to pivot to a money question. I'm going to bundle 2 questions in one, if I could. Who should be funding nature-based solutions, and how do we ensure that money flowing into nature-based solutions support good projects? Maybe we can go in reverse and start with De La Cruz and work our way back.
Yeah, so one of the things, I already said this in my intro, but for Home Planet Fund, it's important to understand that nature-based solutions is a word that is relatively new. And it is encompassing part of, but not all of, what we term indigenous solutions. They're community-led solutions. They've existed. They've been termed very different things, but they've proven out through time their efficacy in terms of biodiversity, in terms of climate, in terms of co-benefits around economic health for communities, human health for communities, not just ecological health. And so in that framing, I would say nature-based solutions is for everyone to fund, right? It's for the international community to fund. It's for, national governments, regional governments. It's for philanthropists to fund, because I think that beyond just the climate negotiations at the international level, these solutions, because they've been proven out by communities for generations and millennia, have those innate co-benefits, right? And so it's not just about carbon sequestration. It's about the health of the soil. It's about the health of the water. It's about having regenerative agriculture to feed people. It's about reforesting with heritage crops, right? And so you're restoring this environment. So in my mind, nature-based solutions, if you look at it from the community lens, should be supported by everybody, because it's not just about carbon sequestration. We need a healthy, thriving planet for flora and fauna to live on beyond just carbon sequestration.
Hassan, Bernadette.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that it's for everyone to fund. And I think this is where it's important to, again, clarify what's already happening. Because how do you make a case for additional funding where maybe you're asking for money for conservation or for restoration, for regenerative agriculture? There are many institutions that are going to tell you, oh, we are already in this space. So what else do you need from me? So setting the standard, then maybe clarify, okay, maybe you are funding part A, and in order to have holistic, impact, you need to consider this full package. So setting the standard is also going to inform, how much funding do we need, and, how to also package that funding so it's not just scratching the surface, but it's actually addressing all the challenges, including the ones that the first has just mentioned. And I really think funding is more both an opportunity and a challenge. I think this addresses your other part of the question. It's an opportunity in the sense where if we are able to make a strong case and all the donors or the funders, including, from the public, private, all the funders really, like we just heard, channel money to this, to address this challenge, then you have more investment going into this space. I think some of the research that WRI we have done so far, it only shows that a very small amount, about 1.5% of the required amount is now flowing to climate solution, including the nature-based solution. So we could do more. And if we make a case for nature-based solution, then we are able to, channel more funding to this area. It's a challenge in the case where it's not coming to actually contribute to reducing emission. It's only offsetting. And we know that that's only part of the climate solution. If we really want to address the climate change and all the challenge that we are aware of, we need to work both at the, offsetting, but also reducing, cutting the emissions from the source. So that's where I see the challenge. But yeah, if we're thought of, the funding flowing into this space could create a great opportunity.
I appreciate that you said that it's both offsetting and cutting emissions, and also just how challenging it is to make sure the funds go in the right place. Hassan, how about you? Any thoughts on how we ensure money gets to the right places, to the right projects?
Sure. So there's a huge funding gap. Achieving Paris is projected to require up to $5 trillion US per year. And the biodiversity funding gap is around 800 billion a year. So we're looking at around a gap of around 6 trillion. So I agree with De La Fruz and Bernadette. Everyone really has a responsibility to put funding into this planetary crisis. But when we look at those kinds of figures, public funds won't be enough, and philanthropy will not even come close. So what we really need to look at are private markets. I'm a huge fan of markets. I've worked on both sides of the coin, nonprofit, but also market side. And when you align incentives in terms of what households, individuals, and companies want, that funding can be channeled down to a village or a household level. In terms of making sure the money is spent well, there are different mechanisms, but one of which is standards, and a variety of different standards, not relying on one. And so projects should be built with multiple standards being adhered to. So in the case of the work we do, we've verified to Verra, CCB, the Climate Community and Biodiversity Alliance, as well as the IFC performance standards. And with that, there's an ISO component. My previous company, we were a B Corp, which is a separate verification process. And with Sayari Earth, our intention is to become a B Corp. So these are all this combined package of what can assure people that communities are really benefiting. And I think the other third thing would be, do these projects achieve an increase in household income increases and well-being according to third-party independent surveys? So we refer to them as ESIAs, environmental and social impact assessments. That's another way of making sure that what somebody says or what an organization says has been verified by multiple third parties.
It's seeing the benefit, the mutual benefit between people, but also nature. I think De La Cruz had said that earlier, like making sure flora and fauna are also well. Is that some of what you're also saying with in selecting projects, or understand when money is spent well, making sure that there's also like who's benefiting, and if both are mutually benefiting is part of the equation, or should be?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the standards has biodiversity in it, so CCB. And in order to achieve that, you have to demonstrate, and the criteria is really quite prescriptive in terms of what you need to do to enhance biodiversity, uplift, what you have to do for endangered species, how you need to monitor. So there has to be a very powerful conservation logic in these types of projects. I mean, at the end of the day, they are nature-based.
Well, let's talk a little bit, let's zoom out a little and talk about carbon markets and the money that's flooding into carbon markets. Is it a distraction, an opportunity, or is it both? I'll let anyone volunteer to start on this one. It's also my last money question, so
you might have to volunteer us, Helina.
Let's see. I don't know that I've started with Bernadette, so let's go back to Bernadette.
No, sure. And I think I had partially covered that in my last response. I think, yeah, it depends. The short answer will be depend, and then I'll elaborate. I think, again, it's an opportunity in the case where investment is being channeled or targeting, the real challenges on the ground, and then ensures that, the benefits are realized at the community level, for the nature, or all the areas that we have mentioned in our intervention. So that creates an opportunity, and it creates an opportunity also for various actors to come together. I think Hassan has said that if we consider the current or the typical funding stream, we are not going to be able to realize all the goals and the ambitions that set forth by our countries and all the key actors in this space. Recognizing that each donor or funding scheme has a role to play is critical here, but also figuring out how we become more organized. I always look at this carbon space and I see a lot of small action here and there. And are they adding up to really stand up to the big challenges that we are we are facing right now? I think that's very a critical area for us to explore. How do we become more organized? How do we channel resources where there is the most need? And then how do we follow those standards? So there are opportunities to ensure that the money flowing into the carbon space can be advantageous. Again, there are challenges in the case where we remain disorganized, in the case where the actors are not following the base standards, in the case where we are only looking at offsetting and not actually cutting the emissions. So really that is more of a distraction because you are really scratching the surface. You are not actually addressing the root cause of the problem. So, and you are likely just to stay in this cycle. So that's what I would say, that maybe well-designed of funding that is going to address the root cause is critical here.
Very well put. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I'll add. I support Bernadette yet again. I really do think that in theory, this idea, right, behind carbon markets is you get the economic co-benefits for a nation, a people, as a community, while a company, a nation, international community can do good, right? So it's this co-benefit of ecological and economic health. In reality, I think it's proven to be a distraction so far. Many of the communities we work with have found it, one, very extractive when they've tried to engage in these processes. Two, to Bernadette's point, it's not addressing the root cause. The root cause of the climate crises are emissions, right? Our emissions from this very monolithic culture that we've established globally in much of the world around how industry is done and what scale looks like and what kind of unending scale and increase of production looks like. So the carbon markets aren't addressing that. Frequently, they're just helping to offset and continue those deeply problematic industries, right? I think even more so, one of my issues with the carbon markets for the communities that we do, the tribes and communities who have tried to explore it, is there are very set, rigid standards. There are different ones, right, that Hassan mentioned. And the challenge there is, it is this monolithic way of looking at the world and ecologies and, you know, worldviews that has gotten us into this mess, right? It's this idea that you can kind of impose a very specific way of living or governance or economies into a community, when in reality, each community's answer to what regeneration looks like, right? What a nature-based solution look like, what regenerative agriculture looks like is quite different. And that's on purpose. So that is the right answer for those people in that time, in that place. Again, that's been proven out. And so to me, I think that I have yet to see one that is able to understand localized contexts. Two, does not make communities feel that they're being left behind and or exploited. And then three, is not just trying to offset, is actually trying to address the root causes.
Helina, I take a slightly different view. I don't think money is flooding into this sector. I think it's flooding out. Over the last year, the voluntary carbon markets, which is what we're really talking about, being nature, has declined by about 50%, following the Guardian articles and some of the critiques. And I think it's really important to remember that at the end of the day, these voluntary markets are voluntary. The corporations that are getting involved, they don't have to. And what has happened as well is that a number of companies, because of the concerns, they're on the sidelines. So these are companies that are effectively engaging in this climate action without being required legally to do this yet. And there's literature that demonstrates that those companies that do get involved in these carbon credit projects, there's something like somewhere between 2 and 3 times more likely to be investing in other decarbonization. Because at the end of the day, what is critical is reduction of emissions first. But for these unabated emissions, it's really important, I believe, to go carbon negative, not even carbon neutral. That's not enough. Just to put that in context in terms of the money, the voluntary carbon market was globally worth around $2 billion in 2021. 2022. It's dropped to around just over $1 billion, 2023. And just to put that in context, the market of avocados that goes from one country, Mexico, to the United States is about a $2 billion industry. That market is reportedly cartel dominated, contributes to deforestation, and has high rates of homicide. And yet it's supplying, a product that the market wants. The global voluntary carbon market is half of the US-Mexico trade. In terms of the emissions, what we're talking about right now is really tiny. The world's emitting around 50 billion tons carbon dioxide equivalent per annum. Vera, which is the largest registry in the voluntary carbon market, it was a big milestone for them when they retired 1 billion credits. That took 15 years to get to that. Retirements, issuances, there's a big issue right now with supply versus demand. So for this market really to grow, it would have to exponentially grow to really be having an impact on the actual problem.
De La Cruz, would you like to say a little bit more? I wonder if I could follow up too, like with it, if it's a distraction, like how should it be done differently?
I think, I mean, to Hassan's point, right? I think we're saying the same thing in some of these points, which is, and Bernadette has mentioned this quite a few times as well, is we're not just looking to offset, we're looking to change, and we need rapid change. I think to me, I always try to look, and this is my own background speaking, but I always try to look at who's being left behind. And to me, I feel that the international community, has goodwill. All of us are part of it. All of us are trying the best we can. And yet I think when we try to impose one particular view or one particular model or one particular thing that's going to save all of us, that's going to be the solution to everything, it is easy and it is therefore disingenuous, because that's not how the world works, right? Each context is complex, each thing is different. And so there, to Hassan's point, since he works in this space and has for a long time, he may have seen projects that I haven't, that have been highly effective. But I know that in the communities that we work in, right, whether they're tribal communities, self-identified indigenous peoples, and I know Trixie Ann asked, how do we define community? And in the beauty and challenge of all of this, it's context specific, right? That's the answer. And I think that's the answer here as well, is it can work in one context and be very detrimental and problematic in the other. And I think I'll just kind of share one of the things that comes up a lot when we talk with our communities, and our East Africa ones right now are facing this, and it feels that they keep yelling about it, no one's hearing in them, is that these are lands that have been critical to their way of life because they're pastoralists, right? So seasonally, they shift around with their herds and their families. It's being locked up. They're being asked to, they're not being asked, they're being forced off the land so that that land can be used for carbon credits and MBS. And so I always want to ask, I understand how it helps some people, but I want to make sure that the people who have been taking care of the land for a long time, the people who have lived on it, who have died on it, who have ancestors, who have spirituality tied to it, that they're also taken care of, that they're able to continue to be in relationship with that land and that water. And so I think that's the angle I always come to with this is, are the most vulnerable and the people at the front lines being protected, are they benefiting? And if not, then we need to reframe.
You three are stirring a really lively conversation in the chat. It's going faster than I can read, but I hope we actually get to some of the questions and highlight them. Kind of along those lines, De La Cruz, I wonder if we should be concerned about nature-based solutions as a new form of climate colonialism, if it's as some groups have labeled it as. I'm wondering if any of you have thoughts about that. And I'll start with De La Cruz, who just spoke. Let's go with Hassan first.
I think it's a risk. And with any market which is new and emerging, there will be bad actors that do come in whose motivation is maybe not necessarily impact. I'm from Kenya. My father's Kenyan, and I was born and brought up there. I'm quite sensitive to the whole colonial thing because it impacts my family history. We ended up in Kenya 4 generations ago because of this. My view is that what we've tried to build is that it's actually quite empowering. The way we communicate this is that the communities who do agree to participate in this type of a project, they're providing a globally valuable service. It's a form of a cleanup service in terms of carbon removal. Carbon emitted in Long Beach, California, that 1 ton. If you remove that 1 ton in Mozambique, the atmosphere basically nets out. So you don't have to do it in the place where the emissions actually occurred. And if communities are providing a globally valuable service, they should be paid for that. So it's almost in a way reframing this whole approach in terms of this is when, the previous question was, is this a distraction? These carbon markets are an opportunity. They are perhaps the biggest opportunity of our generation to restore the functioning of the planet, which we all know is in decline across all sorts of different metrics. To restore the planet, there is a huge need of capital and capacity. And right now, just asking or hoping that this is going to come from grants, or just hope that government will just borrow more and then issue out cheap debt, which we all end up having to pay anyway, is wishful thinking. Why not let the markets do what markets are designed to do?
How about you, Bernadette? What do you think?
No, I agree. I completely agree with Hassan's intervention about the risk of colonial climate colonialism, and the fact that, not only should community be paid for, doing the cleanup, I think they should agree to participate in these processes. So we always see or we hear about these top-down projects that are designed from, if I keep with the example that Hassan gave, could be designed in California, they are being applied into Mozambique or my own country in Rwanda. And people are like, what, why is this happening? Why am I being, chased out of my own land? What do I get from this? So really there is that need to not only, put numbers out there that you will benefit, but also like what's in it for the community. So there are models out there on making sure that these processes are locally led, and even the definition of locally led vary depending on where you are finding this from. And there are various ways to engage community. Are you engaging them throughout the entire processes? Are you just informing them about this project and telling them about the benefits that will accrue to them? Are you engaging them from the design to the monitoring to the implementation and then access to benefits? So there are various models out there, and I can make sure that I share some of those resources. But yeah, I think general agreement is that, community participation is key, and even recognizing that even within the community, there are a lot of variation, though. So we should not approach a community as one homogeneous group. Even within community, there are those that are more worthy, that are more vocal about the challenges. There are others that haven't found a space to voice the challenges or the concerns that they are facing. So really recognizing the complexity of this space we are operating in and try to find solution. I always see this tendency to just rush things because, there is money available, and then if you don't react too fast, you will lose the money. I think there is value in actually pausing, reflecting, and finding a solution that works not only for nature, but also for community. I think that's the common theme I'm hearing there. And to me, it's worth waiting and participating, engaging into those conversations with community, various actors. and come with a solution that you know is going to work in the long run. Yes, there's need to be also a bit fast, but we are talking about as you strive for efficiency, let's not leave behind the local communities.
Dela Cruz, like how I wonder if how you think about this and how it looks when it's done right. If a few examples come to mind for you that you mind sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what comes forward with our communities on the ground, right, is that they're really focused on, they have a certain way of life, right? And that's evolved naturally, right? And yet they don't want to plug in necessarily into the monolithic kind of common culture. They don't want to lose that spiritual relationship to the lands and the waters. And so when they do indigenous solutions, when they grow their crops in a certain way, when they reforest in a certain way, when they take care of the land a certain way, they're not looking to monetize it, right? Because in some contexts, they feel that it is actually against their spiritual connection and their duty as part of nature to monetize that relationship, right? And so for us, what we found is we always offer the option to our communities. We're happy to connect you to carbon markets. We have had only one community explore that, and it hasn't gone anywhere yet. To Bernadette's point, they're really taking their time. They're trying to understand. But at the same time, all of these communities have been doing amazing work, like at scale. I know we're talking a lot about scale, but just because the nature-based solution hasn't been monetized into a carbon market doesn't mean it's not happening, and doesn't mean that it's not benefiting the larger emissions and larger kind of climate and biodiversity crises at hand. And so that's really where the indigenous, peoples, the tribal communities, the other contexts that we work in, they're doing the work, right? They're regenerating the forest. They're thinking about agroforestry. They're doing regenerative agriculture. They're doing tree planting. They're just choosing not to monetize it because they feel that it is all our shared responsibility as humans, as part of nature, to rehabilitate. And I think what's really important is the time scale of this. There's the immediate now of funding needs to go to these communities now, right? To plant and to harvest and to take care of the lands and waters. But also there needs to be an understanding that soil health takes many years to show progress, right? The lands and the waters take many years to show progress. And so I guess it's like it's a reframing. It's about like right relationship with the land and the water. It's about understanding there's different views of what it means to be a human on land, to be a human as part of nature. And so that's where we've seen a lot of progress and success. And that's where we've seen scale across many countries and millions of people who say, we're all pastoralists, for example. We come from different tribes, and yet we have a shared view of what it means to be in right relationship. And so that's what I would offer is it doesn't need to be monetized, but the work needs to get done, understanding that we have to think about, years from now, decades from now, future generations.
I'm sure everyone has burning questions for you all, and we are about to pivot right to your questions. If you have them, please share them in the Q&A, upvote or add emojis to the ones that resonate with you. Before we dive right into that Q&A, I have questions of my own too for you all. But let me ask you this. What are some of the biggest challenges to advance your work? And what are the best ways for people on this call to get involved, whether they be journalists or otherwise? Who'd like to go first?
Happy to, because I feel like some of the challenges have also been mentioned in the chat. I mentioned the work that we are doing at the World Resources Institute, particularly for our restoration activities in Africa, where we are really striving to support locally led restoration approaches so that we can, address the problems of land degradation. Africa, by the way, is the most degraded continent on Earth. I think some mapping have shown that about 750 million hectares is degraded on the continent. It's really showing the need to act now to address those challenges. And I think to address the problem, some of the challenge is around how restoration is very context specific. And that means, you need to engage local community. You need to make sure that the solutions you are providing are tailored to addressing the degradation challenges in that particular area. But then how do you scale? So how do you go from 1 hectare approach to, solving the challenge for the 700 million hectare opportunity on the continent? So really, how do you make local scale up is one of the challenges that we are trying to address. And the other one is about finance, and is something else that came throughout the conversation. We are also noticing that, money is coming from philanthropy, money is coming from some government, providing bilateral funding to African government, but that is not enough. Calculations show maybe 2 billion funding gap. So how do we fill that? And how do we bring in other donors, the private sector, to address the funding gap? There could be opportunities around monetizing, the restoration benefits. How do we create markets for the biodiversity outcome, for the water outcome? All these outcomes that are not monetized at this moment, but really are mindful of all the challenges that De La Cruz mentioned. Are community willing to engage into this market? Do they have the right expertise? Will the market recognize the expertise that the communities are bringing up front? So yeah, a few things we are sorting through, but I wanted to at the moment just to mention those 2 big challenges we are grappling with.
Absolutely. Any other challenges you all like to share, or best ways for folks on the call to get involved as journalists or non-journalists?
I'll jump in. Please help us tell these stories at the community level, right? And not just where it's harmed communities, but actually the community successes, because there's so much, right? There's in small communities of like several hundred, in, like I said, the pastoralist communities in East Africa, in millions of people. There is amazing work happening, and those people are busy doing the work, right? And so help us tell those stories to provide an alternate to this very single view of what the world should look like, and how we're meant to find solutions. And then I think All Women Tech asked for data analytics. The same thing, help us tell these stories. A lot of these communities are really busy just doing the work, and they don't understand what is the right way to push this narrative for the international community or, national governments, especially Western governments. So help us, reach out and help us, connect you to the communities to figure out the right way to tell the data story. Because to be honest, we have so much data that we sit on and these communities sit on, and we're never quite sure how to cut it and how to present it in ways that will push the policy narrative, or even just the regular person who's reading an article. We want them to feel excited that there's an alternate. We want them to feel excited that people are doing good work, and we want them to see data to support that.
There are a number of different challenges with trying to get a nature-based carbon project off the ground. For a project, they take years to build. For a project to actually get to the point where it's issuing, it's a lot of heavy lifting has to go into it. I'll just focus on 4 areas of key risk. One is, of course, market. Will there be corporates who will actually, or households who will actually buy these credits once they're issued several years down the line? There's the financial risk as well, is trying to get these projects financed. It can be very hard depending on a number of different things. The pool of investors is small. The amount of funding is limited, and it links to this other risk, which is political. A lot of legislative frameworks around carbon are still being developed in many parts of the world, and some of them are not market friendly. Some governments are talking about nationalizing carbon. Some have proposed or are putting in place taxes, which could be anywhere between 50 and 80% of gross. It renders these projects non-viable. And then the final risk is around social impact. When you have a market which is immature like this, and which is under a depressed price type situation, like take red credits for example, the bottom's fallen out of that. category of credit is that what you're talking about at a household level within a community is it's really around behavioral economics. These projects need to overcome the opportunity cost to change people's behavior and perceptions towards managing lands and seas differently. But how do you do that if the price is too low and you're not able to sell all the credits? That's another risk. The other, from a policy side, is that these nature-based markets are still voluntary in terms of participation. The day that they become compliance grade, and there is some movement in some markets around the world, low volumes, but it's a move. But the day that these nature-based credits are allowed into compliance markets, the theory is that demand will be increased, and when you have more funding flowing into these ecosystems and communities, many of which don't have many other sources of funding, it can be quite transformational. In terms of how people can get involved, really if you've got an organization, a climate transition plan is really important. The second thing is, at a household level, is try to have a plan to go carbon negative. Look for ways to absolutely slash your emissions, and beyond that, your impact on the planet. How you can conserve energy, conserve water, throw less out, compost. And for what are your residual emissions, there are online carbon calculators. Go carbon negative. It's what the planet needs. Carbon neutral is not enough.
And with that, I think Seth has some more questions for us from everyone.
Hi, all. No, thank you so much for all your shares so far, and I've been really enjoying this sort of top-down, bottom-up synthesis that's coming out of this conversation. I'm going to try something similar and try to synthesize a lot of the questions that we've had come together in the chat in one, and I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. I mean, I'm seeing a couple common themes in the conversation, and one of these is very much this micro to macro conversation of, hey, we're talking about sort of funding that is coming in at towards nature-based solutions in a very broad way, maybe coming across international borders with some complications about that, and not a lot of familiarity possibly with regional contexts. And then you have on-the-ground communities and project developers who, in most cases, are coming with that context and understanding. But every project has such a unique nature to it. And I feel like all three of you in many ways are navigating in between those two things. Is how do we orient to these sort of localized contexts and needs and serve as a bridge between that and sort of the global work that we need to do. And so how do you navigate that? And how do you approach that in a way that feels like you can help advance these solutions faster along the timelines that we're kind of feeling the pressure of as a global society, when also, as was mentioned already, nature moves at its own pace. And some of the communities are also moving at paces that may not be kind of aligned with how the global world is viewing, or how kind of the Western funding world is viewing how we address this challenge. And I'll pick Hassan to go first because I'll be proactive here with that. So we have time to get to some of the other ones. And if you want to pass to someone else, you're welcome to as well.
Thank you, Seth. You raised some really interesting questions, and the role of regulation is really important in everything we're talking about. If the regulatory environment in countries all around the world speeds up, then this issue of cutting emissions at source faster is likely to happen. And if the residual unabatable emissions have to also be taken care of through credits, for example, and that's legislated, it will lead to much faster action. So the importance of regulation and policy really, really important. In terms of how to navigate this, these types of projects, I mean, it's really, if there's two key things that should be focused on, one is around impact. you know, what is that impact and how do you define it? So in our context, it's at a household level. Are you increasing livelihoods and well-being, yes or no? And the second is around rights. Really, really important here. I mean, land rights, of course, are critical, but in many communities that we work in, the government, in some cases, the president on behalf of the people owns the land and the timber rights and the tree in your garden, even the wildlife, the mineral rights. So then how do you then layer on this carbon trade? There needs to be a carbon right, which is an intangible. It's an intangible. It's non-extractive. But what we found is that where there are governments that legislate that communities can own those carbon rights, it becomes a form of land right. So where they may not own the land or the tree, they own the right that overlies that, which can be a very empowering thing. It is a very empowering thing. I've witnessed it.
I'll add to that a common theme also throughout this conversation around setting the standard, understanding, like, you know, establishing some form of common language. I think this helps then bring all those actors, whether it's, you know, at the local community where action are being implemented, or, you know, government that are setting those regulations, donors that are funding this space. We need to be speaking the same language so that then we have a starting point. And then how do those standards look like at the community level, the various locations where this work is being implemented, then becomes, you know, the more nuanced approach. Without the standard, I think we'll keep operating in this more disorganized space. And to me, that will be the starting point that helped to navigate this challenging situation. Back to you, Seth. Or maybe Delafruz, if you want to add to it. Delafruz.
Just with our last minute or two that we have, I think, yeah, there's this, I think, Hassan, you brought something up that is definitely a sort of touch point here in these conversations, which is over the past year, there've been a lot of reporting, and we have a lot of journalists here that have really shown some of the bigger sort of challenges that have happened with sort of certain projects that have really gone awry, that haven't really reached the people, haven't gotten to sort of the bottom, to the people that they're supposed to be empowering, and a lot of money has disappeared along the way. And that reporting has really impacted, you know, companies' desires for their, you know, to do this good work and to their branding and things like that. And I'm sure that has had sort of residual effects all throughout the ecosystem. There's also a kind of consistently evolved process of science out there that is still grappling with how do we actually capture the values of these things. And some folks have made some notes on that as well. And the science is just evolving. It's continuing to evolve. And then we also have this traditional knowledge, you know, that exists, that knows what the value that a lot of nature brings to people. And I think all of us have a degree of an implicit understanding of that, or we wouldn't be involved in this work or called to care about climate change and sustainability. How do we restrict bad actors, and how do we address these bad actors so that we can elevate the right stories, and how do we even make sure that we balance the stories that are coming out about what's going wrong, or some of the projects that have gone in the wrong direction, with projects that are going in the right direction that really highlight what we can do. And maybe Delafruz, I'll start with you, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, a big question for like 30 seconds. Thank you for that. I think bad actors happen. That's true. It's part of human nature. It's part of nature in general, right? I think that sometimes those bad actors will only respond to public scrutiny. And so that's where, again, journalists are so critical for so many things, but it is calling people out, right? And so I'm not saying don't do that. I really support that. I think, again, this is why it's important, the self-determination of communities or tribal systems or even regions within a country to make that decision for themselves and to take the time that Bernadette mentioned, you know, a few questions ago, take the time to understand, why are these people coming to your country? What do they want? What are they going to benefit? How are you going to benefit? What does this look like if something goes wrong? I think that piece of it is really, really important. While we have this speed and the impending doom of, you know, the poly crisis, at the same time, we have to take the time to understand, who are we working with? Why are they here? What does this look like? How long will this take? And so I don't have a lot of clean, concise answers, and I don't, and you know, I'm not answering in the scientific method, because I think in reality, when it comes to on the ground and in community, it's never clean, it's never crisp. But if the relationship is there, if you continue to build, if you continue to understand who you work with, that's where progress happens. But it's not easy. And I'll give the caveat, I'm a conflict resolution expert. And so conflict is not a bad term. It's sometimes it can be the solution to help you figure out what works. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much. Hassan and Bernadette, anything y'all would like to add to that before we wrap and close? No, I see a head shake on Bernadette's side. Hassan, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. You know, in terms of, there seems to be in the reporting, sometimes it's this ideological shift. One, offsets are really bad. They're a license to pollute. And the other is that the world needs to transition, and protecting nature is part of that transition. You know, so, and sometimes the way it seems to play out is that sometimes it's promoting these kind of ideologies. There are bad actors. There are some examples of terrible projects out there. But there are also some projects which are doing really good work, transformational work. The standard Vera is in transition. There's a new red standard, method, which is coming out. I think the reporting has probably had a positive impact in terms of this inflection point, and causing, you know, that sort of looking in terms of accelerating the refinement in these, you know, in these various standards. And it would be good if there were more sort of positive stories. I mean, but the thing is that I guess, you know, what sells? Is it the good news, or do scandals attract more interest from headlines?
Yeah, thanks so much, Hassan. Just because I know we're at the hour, and this time can be an accordion in some ways with nature. I think we were trying to keep it bounded in this little online box that we've all come into, and I know some folks need to start to drop. So I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you all to our panelists and our fantastic moderator. Really appreciated you all sharing your time and so much of your wisdom that you've developed. I really feel like, Hassan, that last comment you made really puts a nice, actually it helps us wrap this up really well, which is to say there's so much good being done here that is important to elevate, and also to know that in that process there are challenges, as Dilafru said, and navigating through those challenges, being able to have these complex conversations about them are important. And this is one piece of the puzzle when we're looking to, you know, build a sustainable, you know, cultivate a more sustainable planet, you know, on top of the mitigation work that needs to be done as well. And so this additionality, in the end, it's also core to so many people's livelihoods. And so holding both of those things together is something that's important for us to all know and understand. And I hope that folks that have come onto this call have been inspired to seek new stories to tell, or have a more balanced understanding of how to talk about and navigate this world of nature-based solutions that is in the sort of dominant lexicon right now. So as a follow-up, just so everyone knows, again, we'll have a couple more sessions on these topics over the next 2 weeks, one on indigenous climate solutions, which have a lot of overlap with this conversation, and then another one on the co-benefits of climate solutions, which also has another overlap. We'll bring in a lot of really awesome speakers and experts on those as well. So please be very welcome to join us as we continue this conversation. We'll have a sort of after session learning outcome sheet that we'll share with everyone who's RSVP'd, as well as the fact sheet for this. So you have more resources to sort of wrap your head around these topics and feel like you have the literacy to navigate them as they come up in your daily life and your daily work. So again, thank you everyone for being here. Really appreciate it, and wishing you a great rest of your day, however long that may be. And thank you all for joining again, the panelists.